A simple black woman was mocked for withdrawing $100. Next day she demanded to withdraw $1 billion. The pristine marble floors of Pacific Trust Bank gleamed under crystal chandeliers, reflecting the afternoon California sunlight. Located in the heart of San Francisco's financial district, the bank catered to the elite, tech moguls, venture capitalists, and the occasional celebrity. The staff, dressed in tailored suits and designer accessories, moved with practiced efficiency, their smiles calibrated to the estimated net worth of whoever stood before them. Marissa Grant pushed open the heavy glass door, the cool air conditioning a welcome relief from the unexpected heat wave outside. At 52, she carried herself with quiet dignity that went unnoticed by most. Her worn jeans had long ago faded to a soft blue, her plain black hoodie hung loose on her frame, and her once white sneakers bore the scars of years of honest work. Her graying hair was pulled back in a simple bun, her face free of makeup save for a touch of lip balm. The security guard glanced at her, his eyes performing the rapid assessment that had become second nature in his profession. His gaze lingered a moment too long before he returned to scanning the rest of the lobby. Marissa felt it, that familiar weight of being deemed insignificant, but she'd learned long ago to carry that burden without showing its heft. The bank was unusually busy for a Thursday afternoon. A line of 4 people stood ahead of her, all dressed in business attire that signaled their belonging. Marissa took her place, scrolling through her phone, not to check anything in particular, but to have somewhere to rest her eyes besides the backs of those who wouldn't look at her. When her turn finally came, she approached the counter where a young woman named Brittany, according to her nameplate, sat typing. The teller's French manicured nails clicked against the keyboard, her eyes not rising to meet Marissa's until the final possible moment. "How can I help you?" Brittany asked, her practiced smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I'd like to make a withdrawal, please," Marissa said, her voice soft but clear. She slid her ID and joint account card across the polished counter. The teller picked up the ID, glancing between the photo and Marissa's face with thinly veiled skepticism. "And how much will you be withdrawing today?" $100, please." Something flickered across Brittany's face, a momentary break in her professional veneer. She turned slightly toward her colleague at the next window, raising an eyebrow and giving an almost imperceptible eye roll. "Just 100? She asked, her tone carrying a note that made the simple question feel like an accusation. "Yes, just 100, Marissa confirmed, her expression unchanged despite the heat rising at the back of her neck. The teller's fingers moved across her keyboard with exaggerated precision, as if each keystroke required tremendous effort for such a small transaction. "You know," she said in a lowered voice that was still perfectly audible, "we have ATMs outside that can handle small withdrawals. It might save you time in the future." From the next window, her colleague let out a small, inappropriate chuckle. "Much faster than waiting in line," he added, not bothering to look up from his computer. A middle-aged man in an expensive suit standing in another line glanced over, his expression a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. The elegant woman beside him clutched her designer purse a little tighter, as if proximity to someone of Marissa's apparent status might somehow diminish her own. Marissa said nothing. This wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. The small indignities, the assumptions, the dismissals, the subtle ways the world communicated who belonged and who didn't, had long been familiar companions throughout her life. The teller counted out 5 $20 bills with a theatrical flourish. "Will there be anything else today?" she asked, her tone suggesting there couldn't possibly be. "No, thank you," Marissa replied, tucking the bills into her worn leather wallet. "Have a good day." "Next customer, please," Brittany called out before Marissa had even stepped away from the counter. As Marissa walked toward the exit, she felt the security guard's eyes following her, as if her mere presence required extra vigilance. Outside, the afternoon sun hit her face, and she took a deep breath, allowing the warm air to fill her lungs. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Jerome, her brother's longtime attorney. "Documents are ready. Everything's in place. Meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Marissa stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the screen. 3 weeks had passed since Caleb's funeral, and still, the reality hadn't fully settled in. How could it? The world had known Caleb Grant as the brilliant founder of Quantum Edge Technologies, the reclusive genius whose innovations had transformed everything from medical diagnostics to climate prediction. The business magazines had estimated his worth at over $11 billion. The tech world had mourned him as a visionary lost too soon. But to Marissa, he had simply been her little brother, the skinny boy with thick glasses who'd built his first computer at 8, who'd called her every Sunday without fail, who'd shown up at her apartment some nights just to sit in comfortable silence while they both read their books. She texted back a simple, "I'll be there." The bus ride to her Oakland apartment took 45 minutes. Marissa sat by the window, watching the landscape transform from gleaming financial towers to the more modest buildings of her neighborhood. Her mind drifted to the last real conversation she'd had with Caleb, just days before the heart attack that no one had seen coming at 56. "The board thinks I've lost my mind," he had said, laughing over their shared carton of takeout noodles in her small kitchen. "They can't understand why I won't go public, why I keep turning down the acquisition offers." "And why won't you?" she had asked, though she already knew the answer. "Because some things aren't for sale," he'd said, his eyes, so much like their mother's, crinkling at the corners. "Some things you protect, no matter what." The memory dissolved as the bus reached her stop. Marissa's apartment building was old but well-maintained, a 3-story walk-up with window boxes full of geraniums that she tended religiously. Her unit was on the 2nd floor, 2 bedrooms, simply furnished, walls lined with bookshelves. It wasn't much by most standards, but it was hers, paid off 5 years ago with Caleb's insistence on handling the mortgage despite her protests. She made herself a cup of tea and sat at her small kitchen table. From her wallet, she took out the $100 she'd withdrawn and placed it in an envelope marked Mrs. Chen's birthday. Her elderly neighbor across the hall would be turning 90 next week. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet, was a photo of Caleb and Marissa at Muir Woods, taken just 6 months ago. In it, Caleb had his arm around her shoulders, both of them smiling at the camera. He was wearing one of his plain black t-shirts, the uniform of tech executives trying to appear approachable despite their wealth. Behind his wire-rimmed glasses, his eyes held the gentle kindness that only those closest to him ever saw. "You kept me human," he had told her once. "When the world saw code, you saw me." Marissa touched the photo lightly, her fingertips tracing the outline of her brother's face. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, the world would learn what Caleb had decided in those final months, what he had put into place with a foresight that had defined his career. Her face remained calm as a single tear slid down her cheek. But behind that calm, her eyes had grown cold with resolve. The disrespect she had weathered today, and all the days before, suddenly felt different. Not because it hurt any less, but because for once, there would be consequences. She picked up her phone and dialed Jerome's number. When he answered, her voice was steady. "I want to go back to that same branch tomorrow," she said. "The one on Montgomery Street." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you sure? There are more discreet ways to handle this." "I'm sure," Marissa replied, looking again at her brother's photo. "Some things you protect, no matter what. And some lessons need to be learned." Marissa's apartment grew dark as evening fell, but she hadn't bothered to turn on the lights. The glow from her laptop screen illuminated her face as she scrolled through old emails from Caleb. 3 weeks since his passing, yet she kept returning to these digital echoes of his voice. She closed the laptop and finally switched on the small lamp beside her armchair. The soft yellow light spilled across the coffee table where she had placed a photo of Caleb, the one they'd taken on his 50th birthday at the cabin in Mendocino. Just the two of them, as it had been for most of their lives. Their parents had died young, father from cancer when Caleb was 11, mother from a stroke 3 years later. At 23, Marissa had become her 14-year-old brother's guardian, abandoning her plans for graduate school to work 2 jobs. She'd managed a bookstore during the day and waited tables at night, ensuring Caleb could pursue the education his brilliant mind deserved. You never saw it as a sacrifice. She whispered to the photo. That's what you never understood. She picked up the thick manila envelope that Jerome had delivered last week. Inside was Caleb's will, the documents outlining the transfer of power, and a handwritten letter addressed only to her. Marissa had read it so many times she knew every word by heart, but tonight, she needed to see his handwriting again. Rissa, if you're reading this, then the doctors were right about my heart, and I was wrong about having more time. Typical, isn't it? The one calculation I couldn't get right. By now, Jerome has explained the technical details. On paper, it's straightforward. You inherit everything: the money, the properties, the controlling shares of Quantum Edge. The board won't be happy. The tech world will be shocked. The financial press will have a field day speculating about the mysterious sister, who suddenly controls one of the most valuable private companies in the world. They'll call it eccentric. They might call it irresponsible. Let them. What they don't understand, what they've never understood, is that you are why Quantum Edge exists at all. Do you remember that night in our old apartment when the electricity got cut off? I was 17, trying to finish my MIT application on a laptop with a dying battery. You came home from your second shift with candles and that old gas camping stove to heat soup. You said, "This is temporary, Caleb. Your brain is going to change the world someday." You believed that long before I did. The world sees what I built. They don't see who built me. When the money started coming in, you refused almost everything I tried to give you. "Just the apartment," you said. "That's enough." It wasn't enough, Rissa. It was never enough compared to what you gave up for me. You kept me human when success could have made me a monster. When investors pushed me to compromise on privacy features that would exploit our users, your voice was in my head. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. When competitors offered billions for acquisition, I remembered how you taught me that some things aren't for sale. When the world saw code, you saw me. So yes, I'm leaving you everything, and yes, I know you'll say it's too much. But here's what I'm really leaving you: the power to finish what we started. Use it however you see fit. Keep the company private or take it public. Sell it all and open that bookstore you always wanted. Or burn it all down if that feels right. Whatever you choose, I trust you completely. All my love, Caleb. Marissa carefully folded the letter and returned it to the envelope. She'd read enough business profiles on Caleb to know what the world thought it knew about him. The enigmatic genius. The tech visionary who shunned the spotlight. What no one knew was how he called her every Sunday, without fail, for 38 years. How he sent her first editions of her favorite novels on her birthday. How he'd shown up at her classroom the day she finally earned her teaching degree at 40, sitting in the back row, beaming with pride. Her phone chimed with a text from Marcus Chin, Caleb's co-founder and closest friend. "Car will pick you up at 8:30. Legal team ready. Are you sure about doing this at the same branch?" "Yes," she typed back. "That branch, specifically." She pocketed her phone and walked to the small spare bedroom she used as a home office. On the desk sat a stack of neatly organized folders, her lesson plans for the third grade class she taught for 15 years. She had submitted her resignation yesterday, effective immediately. Principal Wilson had been stunned, offering a leave of absence instead, but Marissa knew there was no going back. Tomorrow wouldn't just change how the bank saw her. It would change everything. She returned to the living room and stood before the mirror, studying herself. Same graying hair. Same gentle brown eyes. Same hands roughened by years of work. Nothing about her had changed, yet by this time tomorrow, the world would see her completely differently. The irony wasn't lost on her. For years, people had looked past her, through her, never really seeing her at all. Tomorrow, she would be impossible to ignore. "I wish you were here to see this," she said to Caleb's photograph. "You would have laughed at their faces." The corners of her mouth turned up slightly, but her eyes remained cold with determination. Tomorrow wouldn't be about revenge. It would be about recognition of her humanity, her dignity, and the worth that had nothing to do with bank accounts or billion-dollar valuations. She would wear the same hoodie, the same jeans, the same worn sneakers. She would walk into that bank exactly as she was. And this time, they would see her. The gleaming black Tesla pulled up to the curb precisely at 8:30 a.m. Marissa stepped outside her apartment building to find Marcus Chen already waiting beside the open door. At 62, Marcus carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had helped build something extraordinary from nothing. His salt and pepper hair was cut short, his simple gray suit tailored to perfection. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" he asked, hugging her briefly. "We could handle everything at the main branch downtown. Their private client services would—" "I'm sure," Marissa interrupted gently, adjusting her black hoodie. She had purposely worn the exact same outfit: the worn jeans, the plain hoodie, the old sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in the same simple bun. Nothing had changed from yesterday, and that was precisely the point. Marcus nodded, understanding in his eyes. He had known Caleb since their MIT days, had watched the siblings' unbreakable bond over 30 years. If anyone understood why this mattered to Marissa, it was him. Inside the Tesla, two more people waited: Elaine Washington, Quantum Edge's chief financial officer, a formidable woman in her 50s whose impeccable financial stewardship had helped grow the company to its current valuation, and Jerome Patterson, the company's lead counsel, whose wire-rimmed glasses and conservative suit belied one of the sharpest legal minds in Silicon Valley. "The paperwork is ready," Jerome said, handing Marissa a sleek leather portfolio. "We've already initiated the transfer protocols with their corporate headquarters. They're expecting us, though not exactly in the way we're about to deliver." Elaine smiled tightly. "The branch manager nearly had a heart attack when corporate called to inform him that representatives of Quantum Edge would be arriving this morning. Apparently, they assumed it was about establishing a new relationship for handling expanded international operations." "Did you tell them why we're really coming?" Marissa asked. "No," Elaine replied. "Some surprises are worth experiencing in person." The bank had just opened when they arrived. Unlike yesterday's busy afternoon, the lobby was nearly empty, the morning sunlight streaming through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the marble floor. The same security guard stood near the entrance, his eyes widening slightly as he recognized Marissa from the previous day, then shifting to the three professionals flanking her. Brittany, the teller who had mocked Marissa, was at her station, refreshing her lipstick while chatting with her colleague. She froze mid-sentence when she spotted Marissa walking through the door, her expression flickering between recognition and confusion at the company she now kept. Instead of heading to the teller line, Marissa approached the information desk where a young man in a crisp suit sat. "Good morning," she said calmly. "I'd like to speak with the branch manager, please." The young man glanced between Marissa and her companions, his trained smile faltering slightly as he took in her casual appearance contrasted with the formal business attire of her associates. "Do you have an appointment?" he asked, his tone polite but hesitant. "Tell Mr. Hendricks that Marcus Chen of Quantum Edge is here," Marcus interjected smoothly. "Along with our CFO and legal counsel." The name Quantum Edge acted like a magic spell. The young man stood immediately. "Of course, sir. One moment, please." As he hurried toward the back offices, Marissa caught Brittany staring openly from her teller window, her colleague whispering urgently beside her. Several other employees had stopped what they were doing, their attention drawn to the unexpected group. Within seconds, a door at the far end of the lobby opened, and a balding man in his 50s emerged, walking briskly toward them with an outstretched hand. "Mr. Chen, this is an unexpected honor. I'm Richard Hendricks, branch manager. We're absolutely thrilled that Quantum Edge is considering our services for your expanded operations." Marcus shook his hand briefly, then gestured to Marissa. "Mr. Hendricks, I don't believe you've met Marissa Grant." The manager turned to Marissa, his smile firmly in place but his eyes betraying confusion about why this simply dressed woman warranted an introduction. "Pleased to meet you, Ms. Grant," he said, extending his hand automatically. "Ms. Grant was in your bank yesterday," Jerome said, stepping forward, "making a withdrawal from a joint account she shared with her late brother." Hendricks blinked, clearly trying to place her. I'm afraid I wasn't personally available yesterday, but I hope our staff provided excellent service. Marissa's face remained impassive. I'd like to speak with you in your office, Mr. Hendricks. I have some financial matters to discuss. Of course, Hendricks said, gesturing toward the back. Right this way. As they walked through the lobby, every employee watched them pass. Brittany's face had drained of color, her colleague frozen beside her. Marissa met their eyes briefly as she passed their counter, her expression calm but her gaze unwavering. In the manager's office, a wood-paneled room with certificates on the walls and a large desk positioned to impress clients, Hendricks offered them seats and coffee, which they declined. How can I be of service today? He asked, smile still fixed in place. Marissa placed the leather portfolio on his desk and opened it. I'd like to begin the process of withdrawing $1 billion from my accounts. Hendricks laughed, the sound dying in his throat as he realized no one else was smiling. His eyes darted to the documents before him, scanning quickly as comprehension gradually dawned on his face. I don't understand, he stammered. These indicate that you're Caleb Grant's sister and sole heir. Marcus finished for him. As well as the new controlling shareholder of Quantum Edge Technologies. Elaine slid another document across the desk. We'll also be terminating our corporate banking relationship with your institution, effective immediately. All payroll accounts, operational funding, and international reserves will be transferred by close of business today. The color drained from Hendricks' face as the full impact hit him. But that's over $6 billion in total holdings. 7.2 to be precise, Elaine corrected. Plus the personal accounts. Hendricks looked at Marissa, truly seeing her for the first time. Ms. Grant, there must be some misunderstanding. If there was any issue with your service yesterday. No misunderstanding, Marissa said quietly. I'd like to begin the withdrawal process now. The manager's office door remained closed, but word had already begun to spread through the bank like wildfire. Employees whispered urgently behind counters and desks, stealing glances at the closed door. Brittany, the teller who had mocked Marissa the day before, stood frozen at her station, her face ashen. Inside the office, Richard Hendricks was frantically making calls, his forehead beaded with sweat despite the cool air conditioning. Yes, sir. Yes, I understand the magnitude. No, sir, I don't know why she chose our branch specifically. His eyes darted nervously to Marissa, who sat calmly across from him. Yes, the CEO is already on his way. 20 minutes, understood. He hung up and attempted to compose himself. Ms. Grant, I want to personally assure you that what you experienced yesterday does not reflect our bank's values. If you would consider. I'm not here for apologies, Mr. Hendricks. Marissa interrupted quietly. I'm here to conduct business. Jerome, the attorney, slid another document across the desk. This outlines the first phase of withdrawals and transfers. We'll begin with the personal accounts today, followed by the corporate holdings over the next 72 hours. Hendricks scanned the document, his hands trembling slightly. This will require approvals from our regional office and those approvals have already been secured. Elaine interjected, checking her watch. Your CEO confirmed it during your call just now. Time is money, Mr. Hendricks, and Quantum Edge values both. A knock at the door interrupted them. Hendricks' assistant poked her head in. Sir, the regional director and CEO have arrived. They're waiting in the conference room. Have them join us here, Marcus said firmly. This concerns Ms. Grant directly, and she shouldn't have to move. The assistant nodded quickly and disappeared. Moments later, the door opened again, and two men in expensive suits entered. The older one, gray-haired and commanding, immediately approached Marissa. Ms. Grant, I'm William Carson, CEO of Pacific Trust Bank. I can't express how deeply disappointed I am to hear about your experience. I flew in personally to assure you that this matter will be addressed at the highest levels. Marissa nodded once but said nothing. The second man, younger and visibly nervous, introduced himself as the regional director before turning to Hendricks. What exactly happened yesterday? Before the branch manager could respond, the door burst open again. A security guard appeared, looking flustered. "Sir, there's a situation in the lobby. The staff, they're talking, and customers are starting to ask questions. There's also a news van outside." Carson's face hardened. "Who contacted the press?" "No one from our team," Marcus said, checking his phone. "But Quantum Edge is a company of considerable interest. Word travels fast in Silicon Valley." Marissa stood. "I'd like to see the lobby." No one dared object. As they filed out of the office, the scene that greeted them was one of barely contained chaos. Employees clustered in small groups, whispering frantically. Several customers stood watching the commotion with curiosity. Through the glass doors, a news crew could be seen setting up equipment on the sidewalk. And there, at her teller window, stood Brittany, tears streaming down her face as another employee berated her in hushed but forceful tones. Marissa walked directly toward her. The lobby fell silent, every eye following her movement. Brittany looked up, terror washing over her features as Marissa approached. "Ms. Grant," she stammered, mascara running down her cheeks. I didn't know. I would never have." "That's the problem," Marissa said, her voice soft but carrying in the sudden silence. "You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with dignity." One of Caleb's partners, Dr. Aisha Patel, a brilliant engineer who had joined them in the lobby, stepped forward. Her voice rang clear through the hushed space. "For those who may not be aware, this is Marissa Grant, sister of the late Caleb Grant and the new controlling shareholder of Quantum Edge Technologies." A collective gasp rippled through the room. A customer dropped his coffee cup, the liquid spreading across the marble floor unnoticed. "Ms. Grant is now the sole owner of a company valued at approximately $11 billion, Aisha continued. "And as of today, all Quantum Edge financial operations will be transferred from Pacific Trust Bank to another institution." Elaine stepped forward, adding with precision. "That includes our billion-dollar payroll account, our operational reserves, and all international holdings. The total value being withdrawn exceeds $7 billion. Another wave of murmurs swept the lobby. The CEO's face had gone from apologetic to ashen. The regional director was frantically typing on his phone. "You can't do this," the branch manager blurted out, then immediately regretted his words as all eyes turned to him. "Actually, she can," Jerome stated flatly. "The paperwork has already been processed at your corporate level. It's done." Outside, more news vans were pulling up. Someone had tipped off the press about a major development at Quantum Edge, and reporters were gathering, sensing a story. "Ms. Grant," Carson said desperately, "please reconsider. This will devastate our quarterly earnings. The shareholders will learn a valuable lesson," Marcus finished for him. "Just as your employees should have." Marissa looked around the lobby one final time, her eyes meeting those of the security guard who had watched her so suspiciously the day before. He quickly looked away, unable to hold her gaze. "I've completed my business here," she said simply. "The rest of the transfers will be handled electronically." As she walked toward the exit, flanked by her brother's colleagues, now her colleagues, every person in the bank watched in stunned silence. Outside, reporters surged forward, cameras flashing. "Ms. Grant! Is it true you're the new head of Quantum Edge? Ms. Grant! Can you comment on the bank situation? What prompted the sudden withdrawal of all Quantum Edge accounts?" Marissa paused at the door, turning back to face the bank one last time. In her plain hoodie and worn jeans, she stood straight, her dignity unassailable. "Some things," she said quietly, though everyone strained to hear, "cannot be judged by their appearance. My brother understood that. Today, I hope others will learn the same." With that, she walked out into the California sunshine, leaving behind a bank in turmoil and a story that was about to explode across the financial world. By nightfall, the story had exploded. What began as a local business report quickly escalated into national news. Major networks picked it up, financial analysts dissected it, and social media erupted with the dramatic tale of an overlooked black woman who had quietly become one of the wealthiest and most powerful figures in Silicon Valley overnight. In her Oakland apartment, Marissa watched the coverage with a mixture of amusement and discomfort. Her phone had been ringing incessantly: reporters, potential business partners, distant relatives she hadn't heard from in decades. She had disconnected it hours ago. "You should see what they're saying," Marcus said, scrolling through his tablet as they sat in her modest living room. "Pacific Trust stock dropped 11% in a single day. They've issued 3 separate statements already." Jerome pulled up a news clip on his laptop. The headline flashed across the screen: "Silicon Valley billionaire's sister humiliated by bank, withdraws everything." The anchor's voice was dramatic. "In a stunning development, Pacific Trust Bank is facing massive backlash after security footage leaked showing bank employees mocking Marissa Grant, sister of late tech visionary Caleb Grant and newly revealed heir to his $11 billion fortune." Sources confirmed that following the incident, Grant returned to withdraw $1 billion and remove all Quantum Edge corporate accounts from the institution. The screen switched to grainy security footage showing Marissa at the teller window the day before, the teller's dismissive expression clearly visible as she handled the $100 withdrawal. "Where did they get that?" Marissa asked, frowning. "It was leaked," Elaine said grimly. "Probably by a bank employee hoping to distance themselves from the incident. The damage control has been spectacular." Another news clip played. Pacific Trust CEO William Carson issued a statement calling the incident deeply regrettable and contrary to the bank's values of inclusion and respect. However, several high-profile clients have already announced plans to remove their accounts, citing concerns about the bank's culture. Marcus muted the video. "The board wants to know what you plan to do next. The press is desperate for a statement from you." Marissa stared out her window at the Oakland skyline. For 30 years, she had lived a quiet life as a third-grade teacher. Now, she was being discussed on national television, her personal history dissected by strangers. "I'm not interested in public statements or interviews," she said finally. "But I do know what I want to do next." She opened her laptop and pulled up a document she had been working on since returning home, a detailed proposal for a new initiative. "The Caleb Grant Foundation for Inclusive Innovation," she explained as the others gathered around to look. "A startup incubator specifically for women of color in tech, with initial funding of $50 million. Jerome whistled low. "That will make waves." "It's not about making waves," Marissa corrected. "It's about making change. Caleb always believed technology should open doors, not build walls. He wanted innovation that served everyone, not just those who already had access and privilege." Elaine studied the proposal, nodding slowly. "The board will support this. It aligns perfectly with Caleb's vision, and frankly, the positive PR won't hurt after the past few tumultuous weeks." "I don't care about PR," Marissa said firmly. "I care about creating something meaningful from what happened. Too many brilliant ideas never see the light of day because the people behind them are judged for how they look rather than what they can do." Her phone, which she had reconnected briefly to check messages, buzzed with an email alert. It was from Richard Hendricks, the bank branch manager. "Ms. Grant, I wanted to personally inform you that both Brittany Wells and myself have been terminated from Pacific Trust Bank, effective immediately. While this cannot undo the disrespect you experienced, I hope it demonstrates the seriousness with which the organization is addressing this matter. I deeply regret what occurred under my leadership." Marissa closed the email without responding. She had never wanted anyone to lose their jobs. That hadn't been the point. But actions had consequences, and perhaps this was a lesson that needed to be learned beyond the walls of one bank branch. Outside her apartment, 3 news vans remained parked despite the late hour. Inside, her life had been transformed irrevocably. "The press is calling it the billion-dollar lesson," Marcus said, scrolling through more headlines. "They're comparing it to those stories from the Depression era, secret millionaires dressed as beggars testing who would show them kindness." "I wasn't testing anyone," Marissa said quietly. "I was just being myself." The irony wasn't lost on her. For years, she had moved through the world largely invisible, judged and often dismissed based on superficial perceptions. Now, she couldn't escape being seen, but what people saw still wasn't really her. Yesterday a nobody, today a billionaire, but neither label captured her true self. A notification appeared on her laptop screen, a breaking news alert from a tech publication. Quantum Edge Technologies, under new leadership of Marissa Grant, announces major new initiatives supporting women of color in tech. $50 million incubator to launch next quarter. She hadn't even released the announcement yet. Somehow, word had already leaked. "It's starting," she murmured. "What is?" asked Elaine. Marissa closed her laptop and looked at the faces of her brother's oldest friends, now her allies in this new chapter. "The real work," she said simply. "The part Caleb would have wanted me to do." Outside, another news van pulled up. Inside, Marissa Grant, teacher, sister, and now reluctant billionaire, began planning how to use her unwanted fame to create the change her brother had always believed possible. The headlines would continue for weeks, but Marissa had stopped reading them. She had a foundation to build, and it would bear her brother's name, not because of the fortune he had left her, but because of the values he had lived by. 6 months later, the grand ballroom of the San Francisco Marriott buzzed with anticipation. The annual Women in Technology Summit had sold out weeks in advance, largely due to the announcement of this year's keynote speaker. Backstage, Marissa Grant adjusted her hoodie. Not the one from that fateful day at the bank, but a new one in the same style. She had refused the stylist the conference organizers had offered, choosing instead to remain true to herself despite her new status. 5 minutes, Ms. Grant," an assistant said, poking her head through the door. Marissa nodded, taking a deep breath. Public speaking had never been her forte. For 30 years, her audience had been third-graders, not industry leaders and tech innovators. Yet here she was, about to address 2,000 people, with live streams reaching thousands more. In the front row sat the first cohort of the Caleb Grant Foundation Fellows, 15 women of color whose startup ideas had secured funding and mentorship through the program Marissa had established. In just 6 months, the foundation had grown beyond her initial vision, attracting matching funds from other tech giants eager to associate themselves with what Forbes had called the most disruptive force in Silicon Valley's diversity landscape. From a seat near the back, a familiar face watched: Brittany, the former bank teller, now unemployed and struggling to rebuild her career after becoming the unwitting face of discrimination in banking. Marissa had spotted her during the pre-event reception but had made no approach. This was not about personal reconciliation. The lights dimmed, and the conference chair stepped to the podium. "It is my extraordinary privilege to introduce our keynote speaker." 6 months ago, few people knew her name. Today, she stands at the helm of one of the most influential tech companies in the world and has already transformed the landscape for underrepresented innovators. Please welcome Marissa Grant. The applause was thunderous as Marissa walked onto the stage. Her sneakers, still her preferred footwear despite her wealth, made no sound on the carpeted platform. She approached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of expectant faces. "Thank you," she began simply. "I'm not here to talk about billion-dollar withdrawals." A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. The bank incident had become something of a legend in business circles, referenced in MBA programs and corporate training sessions across the country. "I'm here to talk about something much more valuable," Marissa continued. "Dignity, equity, and the responsibility that comes with visibility." For the next 20 minutes, she spoke not about her personal vindication or the dramatic confrontation at the bank, but about her brother's vision for technology that served humanity rather than exploited it. She shared stories of the Foundation Fellows' innovations, medical devices for underserved communities, educational platforms for rural schools, blockchain solutions for financial inclusion. "My brother once told me that the true measure of innovation isn't its complexity, but its compassion," she said. "Not how clever the code is, but how many lives it improves." As she neared the end of her speech, Marissa paused, her gaze sweeping the room until it found Brittany in the back row. 6 months ago, I walked into a bank where I was judged by my appearance. I walked out with a choice, to use my newfound power for retribution or for reformation. The room had grown completely still, every person leaning forward to catch her words. It would have been easy to demand apologies, to shame those who had shamed me. But what then? Another cycle of hurt, another lesson in power rather than principle. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had graded papers, wiped away children's tears, held her brother's hand in his final days. When you are made to feel small, there are two paths forward. You can make others feel small in return, or you can build spaces where no one feels small again. The first path might satisfy for a moment. The second changes the landscape forever. In the back row, Brittany wiped away a tear. My brother believed that technology should be a door, not a wall. That innovation should serve everyone, not just those who look a certain way or speak a certain language or come from certain zip codes. Marissa stepped away from the podium, moving to the center of the stage. I never asked for wealth or power. But having received both, I had to ask myself, what would I do with it? What story would I write? She looked out at the fellows in the front row, young women whose brilliance might never have been recognized without the Foundation's support. Wealth can buy silence or change, she said, her voice strong and clear. I chose change. For my brother. For every woman who ever walked into a room and was made to feel small. For every brilliant mind overlooked because it didn't match someone's expectation of what brilliance looks like. The silence held for a moment, then broke as the audience rose to their feet. The applause was deafening, accompanied by cheers and more than a few tears. Backstage, after the standing ovation had finally subsided, Marissa found a moment of quiet. On her phone was a notification. Pacific Trust Bank had just announced a major new initiative focused on inclusive lending practices for minority entrepreneurs, with a $100 million commitment. She smiled slightly. The lesson had been learned, it seemed. Not through shame, but through example. Outside, a car waited to take her to the next meeting, the next decision, the next step in building the legacy she had never sought but had now embraced fully. In her pocket was the worn photo of Caleb that she still carried everywhere. You kept me human, he had told her once. Now, in a world quick to dehumanize, quick to judge, quick to dismiss, Marissa Grant had found her purpose: to ensure that humanity remained at the center of innovation, that dignity remained more valuable than dollars, and that no one who walked through her door would ever be made to feel small again. The door to the future she was building stood open, and everyone was welcome to walk through.